Hello, welcome to the Little Quilt House YouTube channel. My name's Amanda Little and I want to say a big thank you for stopping by and watching this first YouTube video. So today we're going to do a quick tutorial. I'm going to show you how to make the cushion from issue 62 of Today's Quilter, where I'm really pleased to say that my first project got front cover shot. So before we get started with the tutorial, I've just got a couple of thank yous. First of all, to everyone at Today's Quilter. They've been so kind, and just thanks so much for giving me the front cover on my very first project. Also to Hantex, they have been very generous and supplied the fabric for the cushion and the quilt. The fabric is the Open Road collection by Bonnie Christine for Art Gallery Fabrics, and I think you'll agree it's gorgeous. It's really bright, light and fresh. It would mean the world to me if you would go and give this video a like, perhaps even subscribe, press the notification bell so that you'll always know when I've posted a new video. So without further ado, let's get sewing. The cushion's made from 4 identical log cabin blocks, 2 in the Under the Sun colourway and 2 in the Under the Trees colourway. To piece the Under the Trees block, start with a 2-inch centre square, then add strips in an anti-clockwise direction until the block finishes at 9 inches square. The piecing sequence for the Under the Sun block is exactly the same, again working in an anti-clockwise direction, and remember that a new strip always covers the end of the last strip you added. The quickest and easiest way to piece the log cabin blocks is to chain piece them. I've laid them out on my cutting mat and I'm going to set it next to the sewing machine and show you how to piece them. Place the centre fabric square and a background strip right sides together and with a 1/4 inch seam sew along one side. At this point you can press to set the seam and press the seam allowance open, although I prefer to use my fingernail just to press the seam whilst I'm working, but I do use my iron to press the whole block properly at the very end. Working in an anti-clockwise direction, place another background strip right sides together with that previously pieced unit. Using your 1/4 inch seam allowance, sew the pieces together. As you approach any pins, remember to slow down and remove them. And finger press the seam allowances open. Continue in this manner, adding strips in the same sequence and remembering that the new strip always covers the end of the last strip you added. The finished block should measure 9 inches. Place the completed block face down on the ironing board. It should measure 9 inches square at this point. Press all of the seams open I prefer to use a dry iron as I find the steam can distort the block. Then flip the block over and give it a light press from the front side. Lay out the blocks into a 4-patch unit. I've chosen to go with the barn raising layout to mirror the quilt. You can choose to set them out in whichever orientation you prefer. Once you've decided on the block placement, join the blocks into pairs and join the pairs into the completed cushion top. I'm now going to pop this onto my long arm quilting machine. In future videos I will go through the procedure for quilting on a domestic sewing machine. I chose to quilt my top with the Spirals and Bubbles edge to edge design, and I used a cream coloured glide thread. I've trimmed the backing and the wadding even with the edges of the cushion top. I chose to overlock the edges of my cushion top, but this is purely personal preference. To make the cushion back, take 2 separate pieces of fabric, one at a time, place it face down onto the cutting mat. Take a ruler and draw a 1-inch line using a marking tool of your choice. I'm using pencil. Bear in mind, if you use a friction pen, there's a good chance your marks could disappear when we press the seam up. Once you've marked in your 1-inch line, go in and mark a second line a 1/2 inch above that first 1-inch line. Turn under a 1/2 inch so that the raw edge touches that first drawn line. Press with a dry iron. Turn under another 1/2 inch so that the fold now meets the top drawn pencil line and press with a dry iron. When it's complete, you should have a double fold 1/2 inch hem. Now we're going to take it across to the sewing machine and top stitch it into place. To get a really accurate line of top stitching, I like to use my blind stitch foot. I also move the needle as far over to the left as it will go, and I lengthen the stitch length to 3mm. Place the cushion back under the presser foot. Align the folded edge of your hem with the guide on the blind stitch foot and carefully stitch along the entire length. Repeat with the second cushion backing piece. Now it's time to assemble the cushion. Place the quilted cushion front face down onto your mat. Place a cushion backing piece on top of the cushion top with wrong sides together and align the bottom and side raw edges. Place the second cushion backing piece on the cushion top, again wrong sides together, but this time align the top and side raw edges. It will overlap the first backing piece. Pin all around the edges to secure them in place before we take them across to the sewing machine. I like to use my walking foot from this point on, just because we're working now with so many layers. So with a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and end, and also reverse stitching where the two fabrics overlap. This is to reinforce the area that will be under stress as you insert the cushion pad. As you approach the corner, pivot and turn and continue on to the next seam. At this point, you've created the envelope cushion back. Now it's time to join our binding fabric into one long length. Place your binding strips onto your pressing mat, right sides facing down. Fold the corners downwards to form a 45-degree triangle and press with a hot dry iron to leave a crease mark. Take the flat end of one of the binding strips, flip over the 45-degree angled edge of another strip and place the two fabrics on top of each other. Using fabric glue, apply a fine thin line approximately 1/8 inch away from the folded edge to that diagonal fold on the binding strip. Replace the binding strip on top of the other binding strip. Make sure that they're aligned nicely, that the edges match, and then press again with your hot dry iron just to set that glue. This has now glue basted those edges together, which means you won't need any pins when you take it across to the sewing machine, and you will have a really nice clear crease line to follow as your stitching line. Using a standard stitch length, sew the binding strips together following the crease line that you made earlier. It's not usually necessary to reverse stitch at the beginning or the end of the seam. Once you've sewn the seam, and before you press the binding open, it's important to pull apart the glue basted seam, like so. Once the seam is sewn and you've popped apart the glue basted edges, take your rotary cutter and trim the seams down to 1/4 inch. Using a dry iron, press the seam allowances open. Fold the whole length of the binding strips in half lengthways, wrong sides together, and press. You can remove the dog ears as you go along. Now we can take our completed binding over to the sewing machine and attach it to the front of the cushion. Leaving a tail at the beginning and starting part way down one edge, match the raw edges of the binding to the raw edges of the cushion and sew in place. As you approach the end of the seam, slow down and then take the binding and turn it back on itself in line with the raw edge of the cushion top. Using your fingernail, press down firmly to create a crease mark. Fold the binding across, aligning that crease mark with the raw edge on the right hand side. Press to create another crease mark. Unfold the binding back into its original position. Continue stitching up to the diagonal crease mark you've just created. Reverse stitch at this point and then remove it from the machine. Fold the binding down, aligning it with the second edge of the cushion top. The fold should be even with the first edge of the cushion. Sew the binding to the next edge of the cushion top. You can start right at the edge unless your machine has a difficult time getting started on so many layers of fabric. In that case, you can just start sewing 1/4 of an inch from the fold, but do make sure to backstitch. Repeat these steps for the remaining corners on the cushion top. Continue stitching until you are back near the beginning of the binding strip. At this point, remove the work from the sewing machine and place it on a flat surface. At the centre point of the cushion, fold the binding back on itself and press with a dry iron to create a crease mark. Then we're going to pull the whole binding open so that you can see the crease mark you've just made. Now fold over the binding so that the crease mark matches up with the raw edge of the binding and forms a 45-degree angle. And press once again with a dry iron. Now usually I would be able to open out the binding completely. Because it's such a small project, I haven't got a great deal of space. For the time being, I'll glue base the ends together in the same way that I joined the binding strips earlier on. I will create a standalone binding video that will go into a lot more depth than I can show in this video. Let me know in the comments box below if there are any other techniques that you'd like me to cover in more depth for you. To complete the cushion, fold the binding over the raw edges to the back of the cushion and then neatly stitch in place by hand. You can slip stitch, but here I'm using the ladder stitch as I feel that it gives an invisible finish. Insert a cushion pad into your completed cushion cover and enjoy. So thanks so much for watching. I'll be back sooner rather than later to annoy you again. My next offering is going to be from Today's Quilter issue number 63, where I'll be making a friendship braid quilt using some gorgeous Liberty fabrics. Please subscribe to Today's Quilter. It's a brilliant magazine. There's so many gorgeous projects in it this month and every month. And also don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Let me know in the comments what sorts of things you'd like me to cover and film for you for future videos. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye.